Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio.
Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by the Hard Truth Distilling Company in Brown County, Indiana.
So for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, time!
3 on the way. Oh! It went in! It went in! And Indiana wins the ball game!
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Float game for the win! Ayler's gone. Goodbye. Touchdown, Indy. Woo! IU! America! They got a football team now!
Pretty simple. I win. Google me.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
Now, from the Hard Truth Studios, here's Jim Coyle.
Welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio coming to you here on this Friday. I'm glad to have you along, no matter where or how you're listening, on one of our great affiliates like 97.7 ESPN, The Ref. Always the right call down in Evansville or up in the region on the voice of the region, 1230 AM, 104.7 FM, WJOB, and over in Fort Wayne on Fort Wayne's only sports station, 1380 The Fan. Keep it tuned right here. There's no reason to go anywhere else. Keep it locked. Or if you're following along on YouTube, make sure you've hit that subscribe, notifications, and the like button. Might as well, if you like us, say, hey, we like you. We appreciate it. It helps us immensely. And I never think of all this stuff. And I know because anything that's out on YouTube, our radio show goes out on YouTube as well as a podcast as well. But it's anything that's on YouTube, everybody is don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button. Yada yada. I know you get sick of hearing it, but it helps us, and we're grateful for you, and we appreciate it. Also, if you're a Twitter user, follow me on Twitter. Just get your phone out right now and at Jim Coyle ISB. Zach Osterman joining us here in a little bit from the Indy Star, and we'll talk more about Indiana's impending game in Iowa City tomorrow, because Indiana has to start locking up some wins. They're going to have to find some road wins, and not that Iowa's a good place to look for that. I mean, on the road, they're what I'd call a middle of the pack Big Ten team, but still tough place to play. A lot of these places are going to be tough places to play, without question. Last night alone, you had Oregon, who had been beaten the last couple times at home. They go on the road and beat a pretty good Ohio State team, who's now 2-3 in the Big Ten. Oregon now 3-2 in the Big Ten, but Ohio State 10-6 overall. Not having the start of the season that I was expecting from them, to be quite honest with you. So we'll see how that turns out for the Buckeyes. But Oregon, that helped them because they had taken a couple on the chin here recently. Washington, not good. Washington, Minnesota, Washington, Minnesota, and who's the other team I'm blanking on? USC. Those are going to be the three teams that do not make the Big Ten tournament this year. They're not good. Michigan State home takes care of them, 88-54. Purdue goes on the road to Rutgers and pretty much handles it to them. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star, the IU beat writer for the Indy Star. Zach, I was just talking about last night's Big Ten scores, and Purdue going to Rutgers. Rutgers is, boy, their season is kind of imploding a little bit, and they're 8-8 overall, 1-4 in the Big Ten. They get beat 68-50, and things are not going great for Rutgers. Although they have a lot of talent, they were without Dylan Harper. I'm not sure if he's still out or not. That would obviously be a big blow to them. But how are things going with you? I know you got more snow coming maybe for the kiddos, so I'm sure it's like Christmas again for them.
Yeah, we're doing e-learning for the day, and I don't think we're going to get quite as much, but we're still going to get quite a bit in terms of, I think it's probably going to be a quiet night at home in the end.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm looking forward to a little bit of that. Indiana hits the road, a win over USC the other night. That was probably, I'm thinking this was the best team win they've had this year. And I say that because they were without Mackenzie or Malik Renew, and in all essence, without Mackenzie Mgbako, who just had a very bad night, 0 for 8, only played 15 minutes. So they had to pick up for him, but his teammates did that. Everyone seemed to chip in a lot of different ways. You got 9 points off the bench from Bryson Tucker, who had been in kind of a slump, but they're able to get past that. But they cannot go on the road to places like Iowa City and have Kanan Carlisle go 1 for 7 and Malik Renew 0 for 8 and expect to win those games, I don't think.
Well, no, I mean, listen, it's always going to be harder to win on the road. I'm looking at the box score up here. I mean, excuse me, the one thing I'd say is, like, this was part of the idea of this Indiana team, was that, at its best, it was supposed to be so talented and so skilled that anybody could have a night off and someone else would just sort of step into their shoes. Wednesday night, it's kind of a combination of like Luke Goody, Bryson Tucker, Trey Galloway and Miles Rice getting a little more offense than they got in the Penn State game, while still rebounding and assisting really well. Obviously, if you're Indiana, you need Mgbako better at Iowa, and I think you need him better at Iowa in part because that's probably a game where he's going to have a little bit more of a physical mismatch. I mean, if you look at Iowa, Josh Dix is 6'6", Peyton Sanford is 6'8", but I don't know that you're talking about two players, and maybe this is just, I don't know, I might be being harsh on Iowa just because of the wider defensive frailty of the team, but I don't think you're talking about players that maybe have the sort of like the reach, the length to be able to not just measure up close to Mackenzie Mgbako in terms of height. But I mean, USC is a very long team. All those guys are 6'5", 6'8", 6'10", tons of
very athletic, very quick and athletic.
Very athletic team. And obviously I know, listen, they're kind of raw, which is what you'd expect from a team that's basically brand new. Eric Musselman had to remake that whole roster. And so they're still clearly kind of working through some growing pains of their own. But that is kind of the profile of a team that might give someone like Mackenzie Mgbako a little more trouble when it's, when the front line is 6'7", 6'7", 6'10". Iowa just defensively as a team, frankly, and therefore I don't think it's unfair to say as individuals, is just not that good, at the defensive end of the floor. Offensively, they're outstanding. Offensively, they are one of the most efficient teams in the country, albeit, they've been a little bit less efficient in Big Ten play, but like they're hitting more than 40% of their threes in Big Ten play. They're hitting more than 39% of their threes overall. This is about as extreme of a sort of Fran McCaffrey disparity as I can remember between, Fran's teams have always been better offensively than defensively, but I mean, this one feels like it's just kind of straight up, all offense, and going the other way, they really struggle. Again, if you want to look at their adjusted numbers in conference play, and they've played 4 conference games, so they've played a decent amount now. They are 17th in the conference on an adjusted basis. They're allowing more than 1.2 points per possession. this is not a team with a defensive profile that's going to have guys that can just lock up Mackenzie Mgbako the way that USC would. And by the way, if you want to go back to that same stat, USC through 3 games, very small, or not very small sample size, but a small sample size, USC through 3 games had the 3rd best adjusted efficiency in Big Ten games. So that's clearly translating at the defensive end of the floor in some ways for Eric Musselman, even while his team kind of figures itself out. Iowa doesn't have that. And so if you're Indiana, yes, you need a better Mackenzie Mgbako because of the matchup and the road environment. You also need, frankly, too, just a kind of a runway to sort of – we're starting to see Indiana build a little bit of consistency here, right? I mean, like, they've won 5 in a row. They've won 9 of 10. They haven't always looked great in doing it. Their worst games in this stretch that were wins are probably Chattanooga and Winthrop. You can frame it as okay, but they haven't really beaten that many quality teams. Penn State's probably their best win. Penn State's outside the Ken Pom top 50 right now. But you can also frame it as, this game was, or that Nebraska game was like tied or maybe 1 point or a 1 point Nebraska lead at like the 7-minute mark. And then Indiana just kind of collapsed down the stretch. But you can also frame it as they won 9 of 10. And in that 10th, they were competitive until they just really hit kind of a rocky spell at the end of the game. You need to start seeing more consistency. Iowa is, frankly, probably not as good of a team as Indiana, and there's an extent to which I think that needs to be reflected in Saturday's result.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough game, but it's also one of a number of tough games that are coming up for this Indiana team, both home and away, as this is probably the most critical stretch of the season for Indiana. But I hate to say this because it has nothing to do with Malik Renew, specifically, but they're probably in a better position right now to win some of these games. If you're using Evan Micaiah's stats, Ballo and Gallo are one of the number 1 combination. Ballo Goody is the number 2 combination on that team, and it's by a large measure between them. So with Luke Goody shooting the ball so as well as he has been lately, if they can get Mackenzie Mgbako back to what he's been doing, just having a bad game, and hopefully that's all that was, because he's shooting 39% on the season. He's not going to continue to miss like that. But that gives Indiana a weapon that they weren't using, because with Luke Goody is now getting extended minutes. So that makes a huge difference for him.
Yeah, I mean, Goody he had a stretch at the very beginning of the season over like 5 or 6 games where he shot 5 of 20 from 3. And that means that since then he's 22 of 51, which is 43.1%. So, I mean, he's very much kind of the Luke Goody that has been such a good shooter across the course of his career. He's very much that player again. And again, like that, that 5 of 20 stretch, I think was the first 6 games of the season, which means over the last 10 games, he's shooting, like I said, better than 43% from 3. Listen, I wrote about this after the Southern Cal game. I don't think you can get away from how good Indiana looks with 1 big on the floor. And that does not mean bench Malik Renew. It does not mean you can't play Renew and Ballo together. Indiana certainly will play Renew and Ballo together. But I do think this should, if at all possible, shift some of Mike Woodson's thinking, give him food for thought while he's still waiting for Malik Renew to get healthy. And, we'll see if Renew is ready this weekend. He was in sweats on Wednesday night. He was walking with a clear limp, but he was, it wasn't like he was in a boot or on crutches or anything. As he waits for Renew to come back, I think it would be impossible for Mike Woodson to look at what Indiana's been able to do offensively, what it's gotten out of Luke Goody, what it's gotten out of its guards, what it's gotten out of Oumar Ballo, who has been, the last 3 games, Oumar Ballo is, I just wrote this down over here when I was writing on Wednesday night, 65 points, 33 rebounds, 7 blocks in Indiana's last 3 games for Mgbako. It is impossible to look at some of these numbers and some of these performances and, feel like there is not some way to incorporate more one big basketball, even as you bring Malik Renew back. Because this is the best version of Indiana we've seen all season.
And the numbers bear it out, and it's not close, to be honest with you. But you asked the question that I wanted to ask. I posted something the night before showing the numbers of the last 6 games. Now, that was before the USC game, but it was a clear divide. But here's what he had to say.
Mike, I recognize it's not by choice necessarily with Malik out, but does the success offensively of some of these lineups that only have kind of one player who is truly kind of a back-to-the-basket post player give you any food for thought with the way that a guy like Luke is shooting the ball, the space it gives your guards, things like that?
Well, it gives us better space, but make no mistake about it, Malik is a big part of what we do. So, he's not going anywhere.
Which I don't know how to take that answer other than, yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, listen, like, he's not going to sit Malik Renew down, and he shouldn't. Like, I mean,
no.
Malik Renew is still one of the best players on this team, one of the best post players, best post scorers in the Big Ten. The other thing I think that's worth saying is, and every coach is a little different with stuff like this, but like coaches will have conversations with players at various points, like through the off season and so forth. And there is an extent to which you kind of have to keep your word to your players. If you want them to trust you, if you want them to, play hard for you and put their faith in you, there is an extent to which you have to remember, too, that at some point along the way, Mike Woodson probably made some promises to Malik Renew. And I'm not talking about like, oh, you'll do this for NIL or whatever. I'm talking about like coaches have to have their athletes' trust. And to get that, they have to be able to show athletes that the athletes can trust them. And if Mike Woodson looked at Malik Renew and said, hey, sorry, you went out and turns out we're a better offensive team with one big on the floor, you're going to play 15 minutes a night, I think Malik Renew would probably feel like that trust was violated a little bit.
And I understand that, but isn't it more important to put the team's overall interest ahead of that?
That's where I think you find the balance. That's where I think that it's the job of the coach is, how do I pull it all together? Listen, here's the thing. I've seen a lot of people have said, why didn't Indiana try this sooner? Well, because necessity is the mother of invention. There's a reason why in sports we run into these kinds of stories all the time. When, somebody goes out, some injury causes someone else to rise up. I mean, this is kind of a silly example, but it is kind of the same thing. Why was Drew Bledsoe the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots and not Tom Brady? And Bledsoe was a really good quarterback. It wasn't Tom Brady. Well, couldn't everyone see that? Well, you can't just experiment all the time and hope that one time you run the perfect experiment, everything clicks right into place and it all works. Sometimes you have to be kind of pushed into a corner and just say, hey, we're going to try this because we don't have another choice to find something that works. Like I said, that is, another good example, a good Indiana specific example. People will remember, God, I guess it was 13 years ago now. Oh, good Lord. I'm very old, Jim. Indiana
please.
went up to Purdue for what, in the context of that season, was a big game for Indiana. That was the year that they beat Kentucky. They started that season 12-0. I think they were 15-1. And then they lost 5 of 7. They lost 3 in a row, including a real thumping loss at Ohio State. They beat Penn State and Iowa, two pretty bad teams that year at home. And they lost at Wisconsin, and they lost by double digits at Michigan. And it felt a little bit like that season was kind of stalling out after everything that had happened, in the Kentucky win and the Ohio State win and all this. And they went up to Purdue, and Verdell Jones didn't play in that game. And for some reason, I'm looking for the box score. KenPom doesn't have the box score other than like the team totals. But Indiana didn't have Verdell Jones. I think he had a shoulder injury. And they put Victor Oladipo on the ball. That was like Tom Crean's solution. And it was a revelation. And if Tom was here, maybe he'd say they were always planning to do that at some point. But in that moment, they did it because they needed Jordan Hulls off the ball so he could shoot it more. And they needed, somebody to initiate the offense. And Victor Oladipo gets on the ball, and Purdue just can't stay in front of him. And that game winds up defined in the end by Victor Oladipo's offense and how well Victor Oladipo plays offensively, initiates the offense, how Purdue just can't find anybody that can stay in front of him and guard him. And I bring that up, specifically to kind of talk about this situation where I would have some grace for Mike Woodson in terms of saying, why didn't you try this earlier? It's because sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you just kind of have to persist and grow slowly, and then hope that in the moments when suddenly you need, something because you don't have any other choice, that slow growth takes a spike. That's what I think we've seen a little bit of from Indiana here. Now the question is, how do you fold it all back together? How do you pull, Malik Renew back into this team while still getting a lot of the best out of what we've seen from, the guard play recently, what we've seen from Luke Goody recently. I mean, Goody's basically been, for all intents and purposes, Goody's been a starter for the last 3 games because in fact, I guess he did start. He started the Rutgers game too because Ballo didn't start it, but he's been playing either Ballo's minutes or Renew's minutes these last 3 games. He's got 31 points, but he's also got, it shouldn't kind of go unnoticed. He's also got 15 rebounds. At least if I'm doing my math right. Yeah, 15 or 16. Anyway, I can't add quick like that. He's playing really well, and not just because he's shooting the ball well. He's defending well. He's rebounding well. You're getting this sort of, again, necessity, the mother of invention, has gotten the best out of a lot of players these last 3 games against, admittedly, teams that are probably going to finish around the middle of the Big Ten or worse. But still, it has gotten something really meaningful out of these players these last 3 games. It's a coach's job to take that, and as he brings one of his best players back into the fold whenever Renew is healthy, whether it's Saturday night or sometime further in the future, find a way to sustain what Indiana's doing well while also adapting that player back in. And it probably requires a little bit of, to your point, a little bit of Malik Renew sort of sacrificing for the greater good. It also is probably going to require Indiana, as it's constituted without Malik Renew, sacrificing some things to keep to make sure that they're still getting something more out of Malik Renew, who remains one of the, like I said, the best post players in the Big Ten. So, I mean, it's a fascinating question. It's a, it is sort of the proverbial good problem to have in some ways. And I think it comes at a fascinating time because, after Iowa, Iowa itself would be a quad 1 win. It's a road win. But after Iowa on Saturday night, you're playing a whole bunch of teams in the KenPom top 35. The only team after Iowa that isn't currently 32nd or better in KenPom that Indiana plays between January 14th and February 26th is Northwestern. And that Northwestern game's on the road. So even that's a different kind of challenge. It comes at an important juncture in the season, and it will be fascinating to watch how Indiana tries to navigate this.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll certainly see. It's an opportunity for him. Zach Osterman from the Indy Star, the IU insider for them. Appreciate you as always.
Absolutely, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Hello, sports fans. Jim Coyle with Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thank you for stopping by our YouTube channel. Make sure to hit the subscribe and notifications toggle so you never miss a thing. All of our content up here every day. Looking forward to it. Thank you, and we'll see you on the radio.